Hello members of the internet, and welcome to 5 critical things not to do to your computer. And today I'm going to be using my big blue blender right there, which used to be my main rig, a Pentium 4 system. And I've actually learned a couple of things that I'm going to describe in this video with this computer itself. So, let's get to it, shall we? The first critical thing not to do is to ignore the power supply wattages and everything and just buy any random power supply. Now over here, this power supply actually is a 500 watt power supply. You're just not seeing the 5 down there, which is too bad. But basically, what you want to do is when you build a system, you must make sure your power supply has enough wattage and the amps on the rails is sufficient for your system. You can either do this by a power supply calculator, or if you don't want to do this, well, if you're looking into a budget PC that'll do basically internet basic office stuff, anywhere between 350 to 450 watts should do you great. If you want a little multimedia system with a very light graphics card like a GT610 for example, 450 to 550 watts should do you good. But if you're looking into a gaming system, you should look at least 650 watts up. And if you're those crazy water cooling, SLI configuration, big ass NVIDIA or ATI cards, high-end CPU, huge overclocking, you might want to look at least 1,000 watts up. Another thing too is you must be careful of how many amperage your power supply can handle. Mainly the 12 volt rail. The 5 volt rail and the 3.3 volt rail are basically mostly used for your well, motherboard components and whatnot, but the biggest one not to overlook is the 12 volt rail. You can have 1, 2, 3, or 4 12 volt rails, but this one has a 15 amp 12 volt rail and a 24 amp 12 volt rail. So what this will do, it'll provide a combined 39 amps of 12 volt power for your entire system. Now, the thing is, a single 12 volt rail with 78 amps is a very good 12 volt, 12 volt rail. But one thing for sure, some people may say that 1 volt and, well, one rail and the other rail is a different thing. It is more or less the same thing. Actually, it is combined power. In the power supply itself, the 12 volt leads actually connect into that one same spot. So there are just 2 rails instead of 1. And it'll be more, I think it's more green to use it. Look, I'm not a power genius here, so. But you do not want to have anything low like that. You can have a 750 watt cheap ass power supply that'll feel super light, and you may have 10 amps of 12 volt rail, which is insufficient. Any system should at least have 18 amps. The second critical thing not to overlook is the cooling system, like fan in the front, fan in the back, and how it goes. Now, for a system to be remaining cool and healthy for a long time, you must have adequate cooling. And this actually basically means a fan in the front and a fan in the back at least. You can have some on the side, you can have 2 at the back, 2 at the front, like this one does. And by all means, this will give an airflow that'll exhaust and keep things as fresh as possible. Of course, you got your CPU fan here. This one has a VGA cooler, an aftermarket one, I may add. And that's very important, because if you do not do this, stagnant air will remain here, rise eventually, but it won't rise as far, it won't evacuate as best as if you would have a exhaust system like this one does. And this is mostly common for super slimline PCs that, let's say for example, a Hewlett-Packard home grade slim desktop PC would do. You'd only have 1 or 2 fans at best, and the second fan would be combined with the power supply sometimes. So that's not very efficient for cooling. The third one is upgrading hardware and not regarding the new wattages and the requirements, and checking if your power supply is going to be good enough to handle that new piece of hardware you're just going to install. upgrading your system, let's say with this one has a, this is a Radeon 9700. Let's say you have your power supply that's up top, like I've mentioned. We'll assume it is a 450 watt power supply. And we have this new beast. I swap it out with a, say 7800 GS, and I don't know, I put a 3.4 gigahertz Gallatin Pentium 4 Extreme Edition, 2 or 3 hard drives, but I don't pay attention to the power supply up top. Well, if the power supply is enough to run your system as is, but with all these new peripherals, it may not be good anymore, because it'll basically overload your power supply, and it can actually do damage to both the power supply and your hardware. So you don't want to do that. You might want to check out the wattage specifications, or the requirements really, for your video card or your hard drives, or use a power supply calculator, of course. A sign of an overloaded power supply mainly is as soon as you touch it, it'll feel rather warm. Like, actually no, not warm, not lukewarm, but it'll feel hot. So that's a sign that you may be overloading your power supply, or you may not have enough cooling. The fourth critical thing is the failure to clean your system. Not cleaning your system may cause overheat. Not cleaning your system may cause overheat. Like this fan, for example, has a bit of dust on it, and in the inside I can see a couple bit of dust, so this one should be due for a little bit of a cleaning. If you do not clean your system, there will be eventually a cake of dust being accumulated just below the fan, and it will not be able to cool your things properly. The same thing goes for your GPU and any other component that has a fan on it. And if you do not pay attention to this, you will you will either fry your components, may even damage your fans, all sorts of stuff. Also, one thing to know, if you are a smoker, smoker dust seems to stick too, so, and there's also a lot more dust. I'd say open up your PC, I don't know, say 2 times per month and see how things are going. And if your computer doesn't get too dusty, maybe you can get a clean out of it every 3 months. But if you're living into a very dusty place and you smoke, you may want to give it a little, a little cleanup every month. Doesn't hurt. It's only like 10-15 minutes of your time, and it'll save you a lot of money overrun. Speaking of cleaning, this is what I found under this feet right here. This is actually, that's actually my dog. My dog sheds like no tomorrow, and this thing can easily get clogged up in the front, and your fan will not be able to, take in as much cool air as it can usually do. And that, my friends, sucks. And at last, the 5th critical thing not to do is overclock your system without the proper hardware to do so. This one's for all the overclockers. I'm personally not an overclocker. Some of you are trying to get into overclocking as well. There is one thing to consider, really. This board is a budget board. It offers simple overclocking, like maybe a couple voltage adjustments, but nothing too fancy, really. This is an ASUS P4S800D-X. This is an SIS chipset in there. And this is actually a budget motherboard. You don't want to do extreme overclocking with this. When I first had that system, I decided to, just give it a try. I brought the Pentium 4 to 3.4 gigahertz with 9 fans. Of course, it's got to be a Prescott. Of course, you need lots of fans. But what happens is, when that happens, well, at least with this one, it couldn't handle it. And it pretty much, it fried my BIOS. Yeah. So this actually is a replacement from ASUS. It's an RMA return board. And this one, yeah. The thing is, components on your inside, it'll actually reduce the lifespan of your actual hardware components like capacitors, voltage regulators. They do exist boards that are made specifically for those enthusiasts and who loves overclocking. Either gamer board, enthusiast boards. Those boards are made for overclocking. So like this, they can take a little bit more of, you know, they can take some in. You know, you want to give them in, they'll take it. These guys are a little like, ooh, you don't too, you know, no, you know, if you push them too hard, they'll just, and you know, you kind of don't want that, because getting a nice overclock, even, well, in order also to get a good overclock out of, well, a good overclock system really, is to basically have as much options and adjustments as possible. This one only offers like a voltage, maybe the memory frequency, which is actually set. You know, there's nothing that you can modify the memory speed. It's just, you get up to DDR533 in there, which is rather weird. And you can overclock the FSB and maybe the voltage for your memory, the CPU and the AGP. But it doesn't increment like 0.01, it's like 0.1 or 0.5, which basically doesn't do a great job at overclocking. So I'd stay away from budget boards really, unless those budget boards are also meant for overclocking. This one is not. Oh, and while I'm at it, something's rattling on this piece of shit. I'm starting to get fed up of it anyways. This system actually has given me nothing but problems over time. It started when Vista Beta 1 started to come out, and it would randomly lock up on me. I had a sound card, and nothing, it would still lock up. And eventually removing the sound card would make the system a little bit more stable. Playing music would lock up eventually. Turned out that the power supply I had, which was ironically a 500 watt, had nearly, I don't remember the amps, but it was so light. The wiring was very flimsy. Sometimes the board would not even post. And so I'd assume it was probably like a 7 amp power supply with a Radeon 9600. Well, it kind of, you know, wasn't stable. Upon putting a new power supply, which was a Thermaltake 430 watt with, I believe, two 12-volt rails, it was much better. And this top silent 500 watt power supply is even more than good enough for this. Well, yeah, for this big blunder. But upon installing OpenSUSE recently, the bastard's starting to lock up again. That son of a bitch. I've actually put more memory in there, which got 3 gigs of high density memory, and it's tested fine. Everything in there tested out fine. The son of a bitch keeps bloody locking up. Well, eventually, this was actually a thing, and this is why getting a good board to begin with is actually something very good, because a piece of shit like this, well, you get what you pay for. Even though it's a ASUS and it's very reliable. The sound card right here is a SoundMax AC97, which you don't really see. And when you plug it into speakers or headphones, if you crank up the volume midway, you're going to start hearing like distortion, like this thing has bad shielding on the onboard sound card. So what I am believing could happen is it could be making so much noise that the system just pretty much locks up, because it is so noisy that as soon as this starts to be used, the entire thing goes bonkers. Which is very disappointing, because a bad sound card shielding could cause an entire system to lock up. That may be true. I wouldn't say no to that, but that sucks, really. That really does suck. And I came to that conclusion because I was playing, you know, card games, browsing on the internet and everything, but as soon as I started to play, let's say, an audio track, a YouTube video, anything that had sound, eventually it would, you know, it took me a couple tries, and then eventually was able to take it and then stay stable, but I still, you know, the fact that having it off for a couple times, eventually it'll probably do it again. So I think this sound card, the onboard sound card in there is fucked. So that could either mean two things. Put a PCI sound card in there, which would probably make it worse, or put a new board. Oh yeah, one little thing. It's about cosmetics. See, This has a door, so it doesn't really show, but when you open it up, yeah, my parents got this at a garage sale for $10. It was back, I think what, end of, I don't know, beginning of 05? Something like that. It's 10 years with me. It's been 10 years with me. And, well, it was a great surprise because I was, like, whoa, I was super happy and everything. And I didn't really care about those little IO ports, well, I mean, IO shields. But eventually, I kind of realized that they are important because this is an open hallway for dust to come in. And that's not really fun. Not really fun. And of course, if you want to show it at the Case Cosmetics, see who has the best looking case, this one takes the heat and says no. It's not even going to come in the top 1 million. Anyways, this is why I have a door anyways. What a piece of shit. Fuck, I hate this system. So anyways, this concludes our 5 critical things not to do to your computer. If you got any questions, comments, anything that you would like to add not to do to your computer, which doesn't, don't put it in a bath either while it's on, or give it a bath, feel free to leave a comment down below. Until next time, take care.